Coming up next in This Week in Computer Hardware, CES 2015, a couple of awesome laptops, SSDs, amazing monitors, the Internet of Things, NVIDIA's Tegra X1, new CPU, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 297, recorded January 8th, 2015. CES, people, monitors, CPUs, laptops, and more.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by lynda.com. Invest in yourself for 2015. Lynda.com has thousands of courses to help you learn new tech, business, and creative skills. For a free 10-day trial, visit lynda.com/twitch. That's lynda.com/TWICH.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, most exciting, and, well, this week, most comprehensive coverage of PC technology. We love laptops, we love tablets, and once in a while, we'll even throw some love at the phone community. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me as always, recently returned from Las Vegas, Nevada at the Consumer Electronics Show 2015, Mr. Ryan. You look a little different today, Shrout.
Yeah, the studio is still torn apart, so we're using my laptop. So if I appear paler, the background looks less organized. That would be why. You know, I was thinking about it this morning when I woke up. I was like, you know, there are still people at the convention center today, and I feel very sorry for them.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
goodness.
and tomorrow, right? And I'm glad to be away. We had a lot of cool stuff, a lot of fun, but glad to be back. Although I will point out that when our airplane landed this morning, it was 2 degrees, which was bad. And it was -7 when we did our layover in Minneapolis. So quite cold. But hey, you know, heaters, I guess.
Sorry, I'm like looking at forecast IO right now because I have no idea what the external temperature is. It's 58 degrees clear and feels like 58 degrees here in Richmond, California.
It might feel like 58 degrees inside my office.
Oh, wait. Hold that
Yeah.
thought. That's the temperature in Las Vegas. My laptop still thinks it's in Las Vegas.
Your laptop's still drunk. I got it. That's fine.
My laptop got ripped. Oh, and you know what? Ironically, it's 57 degrees and feels like 57 degrees and in Richmond, California. So ironically,
it's good balance then.
My drunken laptop was correct for a change. Okay, Consumer Electronics Show. A couple of really interesting things going on. I'm going to slow down and try to enunciate just for the audio pleasure of everyone listening today. First of all, as we expected, the Internet of Things was everywhere. And I talked about it a bunch more on Tech Thing, the new show I'm doing with Shannon. But the short answer is there are a lot of light bulbs. There are some, well, yeah, you know what I mean? Like the easiest thing to make wireless and controllable by Zigbee or Z-Wave, or, you know, if you're insane, some other wireless, you know, Wi-Fi or some other wireless spec. Not the Wi-Fi is insane, but it's really easy to, I was waiting for when that was going to happen.
It's nice that they made a puppet of you. It seems to be missing its hat though. I think it was wearing a hat earlier, but
well, I have my hat here if you want me to put it on. It's okay. So now that I've been puppeted, I have no idea how to react to that. But it actually does bear a striking likeness to me. I don't even know how to articulate that feeling. The short answer we kind of came across was after talking to a bunch of people. You know, the Internet of Things is kind of a hot mess because you have everything from socks with built-in sensors that wirelessly report via Bluetooth to your cell phone, you know, where your foot is striking and if you're striking too much to the inside or the outside. And you've got, you know, wireless technology for obviously your smartwatch and at least 2 and possibly 3 competing smartwatch technologies in terms of the actual operating system running on the smartwatch. And I mentioned the light bulbs because light bulbs are pretty easy. So a lot of places or a lot of different companies are branding their own light bulbs. But you've also got like Belkin's doing a great job with all the Wiimote stuff, a huge array of plugs and switches that allow you to connect it, a really cool maker module that allows for customization. And then you turn around to the Nest, and everything's going to be compatible with Nest. And then you turn around, Samsung's got the demo. If I remember correctly, you walk in and your chair knows that it's like 30 degrees outside, so it turns on the butt warmer in your chair and turns on your computer as you sit down and prepare to be sumptuously attended to by the Internet of Things in your home. And I don't want to give Samsung too much flack, because I believe it was Smart Home that they bought last summer, and they are keeping that technology open, and they want to make they are at least while on the podium at CES, they're telling everybody they want everything to be open and interconnectable, and that's really a big deal because there is a lot of stuff going on here. A lot of interesting stuff, a lot of weird stuff, but I'm going to say right now the internet
is important. I was going to say
Yes.
openness is important in that because even though it may appear to be not this way, Samsung doesn't make everything, and LG doesn't
Right.
make everything, right? And so
Right.
if the Internet of Things is going to be an everything type of ecosystem, then there has to be connectivity and communication and some kind of standardization between them. Yeah.
It would be nice, especially given like 2 or 3 years ago when I remember, I don't know if it was you and I who were talking, but, it seemed like it was going to be the Home Depot spec and the Lowe's spec, and the 3 products you wanted on here weren't on here, and you were going to have like 2 applications running. And so that seems to be settling itself out some. It's still incredibly early, so before you spend like 80 grand, putting dynamic wireless everything inside of your home, you may want to slow down a little bit and look around and wait to see how things settle out. I gotta say, it's looking like it's moving in the right direction. Crazy amount of automotive manufacturers at CES. BMW had one of the biggest displays I've ever seen. Ford at SEMA, where they had the entire front parking lot at CES and were jumping things and screaming and burning out tires and drifting and taking people for rides, that was definitely bigger. But for BMW, a car manufacturer, to be doing huge demos at CES was pretty crazy. They were basically demoing self-driving, autonomous vehicles, several years out on the technology. But some people, that went on the test demos were blown away because, they had a Samsung smartwatch and it was like, BMW, pick me up. And the car would drive itself to where the watch was, slowly and cautiously, but it would drive itself to where the watch was. Or you could basically tell the car to go park itself. Hyundai's Blue Link is they are going to integrate that with an app that allows you to turn the car on, turn the car off, monitor it remotely. Volkswagen had one of the keynotes. Toyota had one of the keynotes announcing their hydrogen fuel technology that they're making the patents open on that. It's crazy. GM, did a 30-second sneak peek at the new 2016 Volt, like literally like during their keynote where they're talking about OnStar and some of the new technologies inside of there, like literally pulled the curtains back for 30 seconds to show off the Volt. They're going to give all the details of that at the Detroit Auto Show, International Auto Show next week. A lot going on. LG and Audi are doing a WebOS powered smartwatch that has an Audi application integrated into it. Mercedes was there with an absolutely gorgeous prototype car. Ford was there announcing Sync 3. So it was interesting. It almost felt like there were more technology announcements at CES 2015 than there was at the SEMA show a couple months ago. You know what I mean? It was and of course, LG and Samsung had their washer and dryers. One of the new Samsung washing machines I want to get my hands on, just because it sounds like it'll make it that much easier to clean the children's clothing, which is becoming a fond and personal dream of mine. We'll talk about HCTVs in a second. You caught NVIDIA's announcement. I didn't get in until like midnight on Sunday. You were, however, Sunday night at NVIDIA's announcement, which was kind of curious. Speaking of automotive manufacturers.
It's a good tie-in here because what NVIDIA did at their press conference was announce Tegra X1, which is a successor to K1. K1 used Kepler, X1 uses Maxwell, which actually starts with M, but it does have an X in it, so I guess they're allowed to do that. The Tegra X1 is a new SoC. It combines a octa-core processor for A57s, for A53s, ARM Cortex A57s and A53s in a 4+4 big little configuration, which essentially means that the 4 small cores operate in low power mode when the screen is off, when you're doing less GPU intense things or processor intense things, and the 4 big cores can work when you need the extra horsepower, thus trying to balance power efficiency and performance as best as you can. Now, the GPU side of it uses a 256 CUDA core implementation, right? You've actually got 256 GPU cores in the Tegra X1, up to 1 teraflop of rated performance at the 4-watt TDP range, support for OpenGL ES 3.1, OpenGL, full OpenGL 4.5, DirectX 12, the Android extension pack, CUDA 6.0. It's pretty impressive stuff. 4K 60 FPS support, H.265 and VP9 decode support at 60 frames per second. These are all pretty impressive specifications that we have there. Now, what's interesting is that it's using off-the-shelf ARM cores essentially, and they are not announcing yet, although it was insinuated that it would be there, a part that uses their kind of custom Denver cores. That SoC, like the K1 64-bit, was announced and it was in the Nexus 9. But the reason we bring this up after talking about the automotive side is because what really NVIDIA spent maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes talking about Tegra X1, and then they started talking about what it was going to do in the world of automotives, right? So they talked about the computer learning capabilities. They talked about image processing, right? Being able to have cameras surrounding the car, being able to drive itself, being able to park itself, being able to recognize road signs and pedestrians and oncoming cars and emergency vehicles and all that type of stuff in real time, using, the power of these new SoCs. So I got just a not quite, I would say not quite riveting demonstration of computer imagery learning for about 60 minutes while they were on stage, and the end result is impressive and interesting, but it was a little bit too much in terms of the learning curve up front as they sat there and explained it all to you. But other than kind of, hey, this is what our plans are, they partnered with Audi. They were actually during CES. They were having a car self-drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas. I guess I didn't follow up. I didn't see if it actually made it or if it drove off a bridge or something. But they did not announce tablet using it. They did not announce a Shield device using it. They did not announce any partner devices using it. So keeping in mind that we just saw Tegra K1 devices ship with third-party units in the last several months of 2014, that we're probably looking second half of 2015 before we actually see this in any kind of parts. So it'll be interesting to see, right? They say it's the same TDP levels as the current part that they have. So any system designs that are on, kind of built around Tegra K1 should function and work with Tegra X1, but you get an improvement in both power efficiency and performance. But until we actually get our hands on hardware that we can look at and test and can, play around with, we'll just have to see.
We wait, ladies and gentlemen, with bated breath. NVIDIA is hard on you. ACTVs, a lot going on. To the shock, I think, of Samsung and certainly everybody in the audience, Samsung revealed they'd sold more curved 4K televisions this year than flat 4K televisions. That said, I still think curved TVs are a blip and are going to go away in the future. I could be wrong about that. The OLED TVs from LG looked absolutely gorgeous because the black levels, especially in a dark room, black is black. They shut all the light off at the pixel level, and it is utterly gorgeous. Quantum dots are coming from just about everybody else, which is essentially a pretty interesting upgrade to the backlight technology. I would try to explain it right now, but I will fail compared to Robert Heron, so I'm not even going to get into it too deeply. He has a great article up on heronfidelity.com, but that's essentially allowing them to seriously expand the color gamut, especially in the reds and greens, by giving a more pure light to illuminate the pixels. Sony had the X900 series 4K TVs that are 4.9 millimeters thin at their thinnest point. They have sort of a thicker base on them, probably to keep the thing from being snapped in half on a bad day if a bunch of people are drunk at your house. But they look pretty gorgeous too. But the expanded color range is going to be a big deal, especially looking at these televisions side by side with the older models. 4K is certainly here to stay, even if most people are going to be running 1080p content on them. I'll mention really quickly Sling TV, although it's not hardware, is a really interesting product from Dish, and it's essentially cable delivered over the internet for $20 a month with some very popular channels. Not all the channels, but a really nice assembly of channels, including ESPN and ESPN2, which I know for a lot of people that want to be cable cutters aren't cutting the cable because they can't have their live ESPN. And that's going to be an interesting one to see what happens because it's available in the Amazon Fire TV, the Google Nexus TV player, the Roku boxes, OS 10, Windows. I could go on for a while. It's mobile is going to be a little bit shaky, I think, but pretty much they're going to, I think, try to get into just about any set-top box. No PlayStation 4, but they did have the Xbox One, and an interesting list. All pretty much everything, but Apple and PlayStation 4 in terms of major ways people consume video. You probably got to get a little closer to the Intel Broadwell, the U-Core. The specs I read for 4% more performance than Haswell, but 22% faster graphics performance. And they're claiming, and the manufacturers seem to think this may be stretching a little bit, like an hour and a half longer battery life compared to the Haswell processors.
Yeah, so I don't know I don't know about the 4% number exactly. I would assume it'd be a little bit higher than that, not much more, maybe 8 to 10 or something. But I'm sure it depends on an application to application basis. The graphics side will be more than 4% for sure. But essentially what they did is they announced the 15 watt and the 28 watt SKUs. So this is Broadwell-U. These are the parts that you'll actually see in the majority of notebooks and the new Nook and the new Gigabyte Bricks devices. Whereas before we talked about Broadwell-Y, which was in Core M, the super ultra low power stuff like the Yoga 3 Pro that we have here, right? So now we're going to start seeing we saw hundreds of laptops announced from Lenovo and Dell and HP and all those guys and Acer using these parts. The interesting thing is they're all dual core. They're all, let's see, I think they're all hyper-threaded, even the 15 watt parts. Now, there are a couple of non-hyper-threaded parts. But they are all dual core parts, and they're all running at, moderate base frequencies with fairly high boost frequencies, right? That's one of the advantages of the new architecture, and they're getting better at being able to granularly tweak clock speeds for burst necessity, right? For when those applications are running that you need a little bit of burst speed, but you don't need it for very long, they can do that within the rated TDPs, right? So, processors now up to the i7 5650U, 2-core, 4-thread, 2.2 gigahertz base clock, 3.2 gigahertz max single turbo clock rate, right? So you're going to get better performance than you did at Haswell, and you're going to do it at lower TDP. So it will be, I think the 1.5 hour extension is actually probably pretty accurate. It may even be a tiny bit conservative, maybe not. Maybe I think it's probably pretty accurate in line with what we've seen from some of the designs like the XPS 13 and the new Acer S7. But it's interesting, right? It's lower TDP, and if they design it in the way that I would want them to design it, where we're at the point where I'm pretty happy with some of the thinness and weight of laptops, that you maybe take away some of the heatsink and componentry that is lessened because of the lower complexity of the design, and replace that with some additional battery, right? The Lenovo X1 Carbon, the 2015 model, did that. It went from it has essentially the same body structure, size and everything, but it went from a 44 watt hour to a 50 watt hour battery, right? So not only you're getting more efficient parts, but you're adding battery capacity to it in the same space. I think that is what will be, kind of presenting the improved user experience there for most people. Because when you're talking about these machines, the 15 and 28 watts, you're talking more about moderate performance, all day battery life, not high performance, right? You'll still get good performance out of the 28 watt parts for sure, but we're not talking about the 45 watt parts that are going to be in kind of mainstream or even gaming laptops with quad-core performance quite yet. That'll be later in the year.
It was interesting. I got into the Dell booth, and we'll talk about the monitor I desperately want a little bit later in the show. But the XPS 13, the new version of it, is fantastic. It's practically bezel-less. They call it an infinity screen. You know, 1080p screen is standard. It starts at $799.99 with 4 gigabytes of memory and 128 gigabyte drive. Bumping that up to $999.99 gets you a Core i5 processor, 8 gigabytes of memory and 128 gigabyte drive. And then for another $300, you get a touch screen. For another $300, you get another $100 will get you a 256 gigabyte SSD. And if you want to go for another $300, they have a really nice screen. I gotta say, I'm not a huge fan of touchscreens on laptops, but I would love to have that 13.3-inch UltraSharp QHD Plus, which is a 3200 by 1800 touch display. Super high resolution. It's gorgeous. They are claiming something in the neighborhood of 15 hours of battery life for this laptop, or at least they did in the booth yesterday. So that's
they told me the same thing. So
you know, that would make me happy.
Yeah.
But that is the. Oop, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say. I mean, I got hands on with it too, and it's awesome looking.
Yeah.
Like if you have a 11-inch MacBook Air, Ken happened to have his with us, and in our video that we did, we actually set the MacBook Air inside the XPS 13, right? And they're identical in size essentially, but you get a 13-inch screen instead of an 11.6-inch screen in the same form factor. Yeah, you can see part of that screenshot there that Burke brought up, but it's light and it doesn't feel flimsy, right? It feels like a solid, well-built, like it's going to be able to, you know, much like the MacBook Air does. It feels like a well-built, strong device that's going to last.
Excellent keyboard, excellent touchpad. Yeah, I was really impressed. They did a bunch of driver tweaks to the touchpad that I believe will be available for older devices. Hopefully they will be. But it feels fantastic. You know, at $799, a Core i3 isn't awful. 4 gigabytes of memory I'm not too thrilled with. But for $1,000, you're looking at a Core i5, 8 gigabytes of memory, 120 gigabyte SSD. That would look like the sweet spot for most people.
I
Core
actually
i7's
just
pretty
went to
healthy
the website
jump
to
up.
start configuring one. When I guess it's like, oh yeah, they are. It's like, let me go see what they got here.
Delivering February 2nd, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it's funny you should mention that.
January 26th. I was like, ooh man, for $1,099, I'd maybe go with the 1080p screen instead of the 3200 by 1800 screen.
Well, I don't think I can afford the jump to the ultra sharp screen, the 3200 by 1800 screen, but I would like the 3200 by 18 screen.
Yeah,
8211 AC.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Nice. I was gonna say the other benefit is if you get the 1080p, it's more of a matte finish than the gloss finish of the 3200 by 1800 as well. So if you're the kind of person, as I am, I prefer the kind of mid matte finish to the screens, and that's actually an advantage, and it happens to be less expensive. So interesting.
Hey, if you get the Core i5 with a non-touch 1080p screen, your ship date is January 26, 2015.
There you go.
Just saying. That's
pretty nice.
I'm going to step away from the credit card before I end up unmarried and not seeing my children.
That's a good idea.
Oh my goodness. G-Sync monitors, FreeSync monitors, and the interesting in-between display. Where do you want to start with, Ryan? There were a lot of G-Sync monitors.
Yeah, let's start with the G-Sync because that's somewhat of a known quantity. We know how G-Sync works. We know that it's out there. You know that you can already buy it. There are several G-Sync monitors announced. The one that I got hands-on time with was the new ASUS ROG Swift PG27AQ. So the PG278Q, I think, is the current shipping one, like the 25 by 14 monitor. This is a 4K IPS 60 hertz screen with G-Sync, right? So it's 3840 by 2160. It's a 27-inch form factor. It is a 60 hertz limit, but it is an IPS screen rather than TN, which is what all of the G-Sync monitors have been up until CES, right? So you're going to get better color reproduction, better viewing angles, just a general overall better quality screen experience when you have an IPS or an IPS type technology as opposed to a TN, right? It is only 60 hertz, so there is, you know, a little bit of a downside there, but I think for 4K, that's probably where we're at for a little while. I don't think I've seen any 120 hertz 4K monitors quite yet.
I was I was speaking to one of the folks at Dell, and they are very. I mean, right now Dell's probably the largest manufacturer or selling, I think, more monitors than anybody else on the planet. At least
Yeah.
that was the general suggestion. Or if they're not number one, they're certainly in the top 2 or 3. But they are extremely uncomfortable with doing anything faster than 60 hertz at 4K until there is some kind of official spec for that. That was what was passed along to me
Gotcha.
when the subject came up.
Fair enough.
Which seems reasonable, as complicated as 4K is right now.
Yeah. The problem with this ASUS monitor is that it is an unknown price and an unknown release date, only stated at sometime in the second half of the year. So you've got at least kind of a 6-month window between that. Acer announced some new G-Sync panels. We saw 144 hertz IPS G-Sync panel announced from Acer this week as well. So that's good, right? We're starting to see something other than the TN panels that we have been seeing for, you know, basically since G-Sync's launch. Some more variety there. Now, what was maybe more anticipated and more controversial is kind of the AMD FreeSync stuff, right? We've been talking about it for a while. We've been very eager to kind of see what AMD has to offer in this regard. We went to the AMD booth. They had 3 different monitors selected. Burke, it looks like the link in there is broken, so you may have to Google around for our story on that. But they did a good job of kind of displaying a wide array of it. They had a 4K 60 hertz IPS FreeSync monitor. They had a 2560 by 1080, one of those 21 by 9 aspect ratio monitors. That was a 75 hertz maximum refresh rate, I guess. And then they had a 144 hertz 25 by 14 TN panel FreeSync monitor from BenQ. So they had several, you know, 3 different manufacturers on display at their booth. They had 3 different sizes and 3 different form factors on display. And the technology is a little bit different. I don't, you know, we may not have enough time on this episode because we have so much CES stuff to talk about, but you have because it's a VISA, it's based on VISA adaptive sync standard. Like there's each monitor is going to have going to have different minimum refresh rates. For example, you're going to have something like the 4K had a 40 hertz minimum refresh rate. 25 by 10 monitor had a 40 hertz minimum refresh rate, and then the TN BenQ 25 by 14 panel had a 30. And what that means is between 40 and 60 on the 4K panel, for example, that is where your variable refresh rate exists. When you go below 40, the standard's a little bit more murky than what you get with G-Sync. Right now, what AMD has implemented is that when you drop below 40, or if you go above 60, like if you're playing a game, right, and it's rendering above 60 or below 40, it actually adheres to whatever your VSync setting is. So if you have VSync off and you start rendering above 60 hertz on that panel, you're going to see tearing on the screen because you have turned VSync off. If you go below 40 hertz, you're going to see tearing because you have VSync turned off. Now, if you turn VSync on, then when you go above 60, you won't see tearing. When you go below 40, you won't see tearing, but you will have the potential for some of that VSync judder as it kind of jumps between frame rate settings, right? If you were with the minimum frame rate of 40, for example, or minimum variable refresh rate of 40, if you're rendering a game at 40 and you hit 39 or 38, in the world of VSync, there's no 39 or 38. So it's going to jump all the way down to 30. So you'll probably see a noticeable judder when it drips below that and has to go back down to 30 until it gets back to 40, and then you can go back into the variable refresh. GeForce or G-Sync gets around it in a different way, a very different way than what they're doing. But we didn't. The demos were set up so that we couldn't go below the minimum thresholds. Go figure, right? So that they didn't have to really answer those questions. But I think those are important ones that we'll have when we start to get displays in. They've promised me, although they've promised me many times, that February is the time we're going to get those in, start sampling finally, and then we'll see. The last thing I'll mention is that ASUS monitor that's kind of I forget how I worded it.
279Q, the interesting in-between display, I think is how you called it.
Right. So it's 120 hertz, 25 by 14 IPS panel. That's really good, right? Like those are good specs. It's also only going to be $599.
Really?
Yeah, they officially stated $599 available in late Q1. Now what's interesting is it's not a G-Sync monitor and it's not a FreeSync monitor. Like it's not branded either of those, but it does support DisplayPort 1.2a plus, which includes adaptive sync. So, according to AMD, that monitor should work on Radeon graphics cards in a variable refresh capability, though it won't have the official FreeSync logo in it. It won't have their certification. It won't have any of their kind of anything like that. But that AMD is absolutely 100% not whitelisting or blacklisting monitors to enable their FreeSync, which is what NVIDIA G-Sync is currently doing. So it's an interesting in between because it's not really associated with either. But it looks like it's going to be essentially a FreeSync monitor from ASUS. That is $599, 25 by 14 IPS, and $599, 25 by 14. That looks pretty awesome, actually.
That actually looks 120 hertz. I'm down with you.
I think a lot of people are going to like this. Yeah, and here's let me tell you what I am really hoping is going to happen here, is that NVIDIA will allow support for this kind of monitor, something that doesn't have the FreeSync brand, that they will allow to work with their stuff. I don't know if that will happen. Maybe it's something I'll be able to find out later this month, but this would be the kind of monitor that I think is perfect because of its cost, and then it doesn't have these kind of the baggage of being associated with one side or the other politically, right? So I don't know. Well, as soon as they told me the price, I was super excited about it. So we'll see.
Super excited is good. The monitor that really had me the most excited that I saw was in the Dell booth, the U3415W, which is your UltraSharp 34-inch curved monitor, 3440 by 1400 pixels, 60 hertz refresh rate, anti-glare coating, and it's curved, very lightly curved. There's a very similar model from Samsung, which they call the 3000R, or I want to say it's probably like a 3000 millimeter radius on that curve, but theirs is the S37E790C, which is also a 34-inch curved monitor at 3440 by 1400 pixels, which makes me wonder if Dell is using the Samsung glass. But it is a fantastic looking monitor up close, 178-degree angles, IPS screen, 300 candelas of brightness. So you're not using it on the deck of a boat, but more than bright enough for normal uses. I want to say like a 5 millisecond response time, if anybody still cares about that stuff. Colors looked good, although I had a very limited opportunity to take a look at that. The Samsung ones, they're like, they are shipping eventually, and we will have a price someday. That's all they said. I paraphrased slightly. But you can actually buy that Dell UltraSharp 34 for $1,199 today. 21:9 ratio. So it's not as expensive as the 4K UltraSharp monitors that are running at 60 hertz, but boy, it looks good. And as much as I do not particularly feel any need to have a curved television in my living room, I could deal with a curved desktop monitor. It would not bother me.
It makes sense, right? Monitors are meant for one user,
Yeah.
And so you don't have to worry about what the other person's viewing angles necessarily are. Have you used any curved monitors for any extended period of time other than kind of sitting at them in front of them for a little while?
No, I mean I've had a couple hours with a curved television. And I should also point out really quickly, just to put this into context, like you can get a pair of Dell UltraSharp 24-inch flat panels with a stand for $800.
Sure.
So it's, this is not an inexpensive monitor, but especially if you're doing video editing, audio editing, if you like to work with multiple apps simultaneously, if you're do they still call them quotrons when you're dealing with a whole bunch of simultaneous stat systems or stock price tracking systems? It was a really nice monitor to sit in front of. But no, I have not spent a huge amount of time working with a curved monitor. If Dell wants to send one for evaluation, I would be very happy to spend a lot of time sitting in front of a curved monitor to see how it worked. Because using a 4K monitor was really awesome, because I could have. It's funny, working with a 4K monitor was so awesome. It's been really difficult doing a lot of the stuff I've been doing on my laptop, because now I'm working with 1080p on a 13-inch screen instead of having a giant screen with 4 times as many pixels on it. But yeah, those were my 2 favorite monitors at the show. I don't particularly want to figure out how vicious the GPU costs are going to be to game on them, but figure that problem out when I have a decent monitor. I don't think this was actually. I don't know if this was actually CES news, but Jeremy posted up on PC Perspective the ASRock Fatality 990 FX Killer, high-end features on a low-end budget. So $144 for a quote impressive AM3 Plus board, and then for $185 you can put an FX 8370E on the board. It's pretty good base for an AMD-based enthusiast system. Decent layout. I would say Modders. Did Modders write the review on this one? Modders-Inc. did the review on this one. Not the newest product on the market, but has a brilliant feature set, and as it is often on a special, a little patience could net you an even better deal. 3 PCI Express 2.0 by 16 slots, and a pair of PCI Express by 1 slots, 5 SATA 6 gigabit per second ports, and an NGFF M.2 port. We've had so many Intel products lately, and especially motherboards. I thought it'd be nice to do a little AM3 Plus love.
Yeah, there are some good AMD motherboards out there that and because of the kind of market that AMD is in and the market that they're addressing, they need to be low cost on that side. That the motherboards tend to be low cost too. So for people on a budget, it's still very possible to build a platform around AMD that saves some money, has a fairly good feature set, and then has the decent, if not earth-shattering performance levels of an 8-core FX processor, for example. So a lot of good options out there still.
We should take a break to thank our sponsor, lynda.com, lynda.com, used by millions of people around the world. Over 4,500 courses on topics like web development, photography, visual design, and business. Software training like Excel, WordPress, and Photoshop. We know you like watching video because a lot of you are actually watching This Week in Computer Hardware. And if you go to lynda.com, you're going to find a really amazing collection of courses that are taught by experts. New courses are added every week. It's really, really good stuff. Photoshop's CC Essential Training, setting up a small office network, Code Clinic, which is really interesting, where it's a series where each month lynda.com issues a code challenge and authors share their solutions using different programming languages. I've done watched a bunch of the stuff on video editing. It's an incredible place. If you've never actually checked it out, or if you're kind of like, I don't really want to go back to school, but I really would like to do something to advance my career or to add some skills to my set, as it were, you should definitely check it out. Seriously, do something good for yourself in 2015. Sign up for a free 10-day trial to lynda.com by visiting lynda.com/twitch. You get unlimited access to every course on lynda.com. You'll get access on your iOS and Android devices, new courses as they're added each week. You get to do it on your own schedule, at your own pace, whenever you want to. I haven't run into a bad host yet, or presenter, teacher, in the courses, and it's really good stuff and really affordable. And we've got a free trial for you, lynda.com/twitch. That's TWICH for a free 10-day trial. Go ahead. I challenge you to learn something new in 2015 on lynda.com. And we want to thank them for supporting us here at Twitch.
Indeed.
I did not, in any known universe, expect Samsung to announce their portable SSDs. Not that it's a huge thing. They're obviously making a lot of SSDs. They're obviously good at it. For anybody who hasn't heard the news, that slowdown thing with the Evos has been fixed. They have software out to tweak that. But they're basically like a 1 terabyte portable USB 3.0 SSD. It's a tiny little handful of a thing. It looks like it's smaller than a pack of cards. Alan wrote this up for PC Per. Quote, these are essentially 850 Evos in a very small portable packaging. USB 3.0 speeds, UASP, so random I/O performance should be very respectable, Alan says. He's not tested it. Nobody's tested it at this point, but something like, quote, 8,000 4K random IOPS should be achievable. This will be a very fast little external drive, 450 megabytes per second, except for the whole problem with the USB 3.0 interface. Really cool. If you are paranoid about losing your data or losing the drive with your data on it, there's 256-bit hardware-based AES on board. So this is cool. I like it.
Very important for the enterprise market there when you have mobile storage.
And the government. And the government market.
Yeah, that's true.
Because for a while there, it was kind of hard to tell whether or not insurance companies or federal agencies were going to lose more laptops with personal data on them. It's going to start at $180 for the 250 gigabyte model, capping out at $650 for the 1 terabyte model, and nestled comfortably in between those two prices, 500 gigabytes for $350. And Alan says they will have reviews of the 1 terabyte version, quote, as soon as we get back from CES later this week. So I assume, rather than being at home sleeping as any normal human being would after a few days at CES, Alan is fervently testing an SSD in a dark corner of the office right now.
Well, as I look across the office, I can say that's not the case. The office is empty of everyone but me. It is late. We got home late. I guess maybe tomorrow he'll be doing that. We'll see. I don't know if we got ours in yet or not, actually, to be honest. But it looks like a neat little device. It looks smaller than the 2.5-inch drive version, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's actually kind of crazy small. Not crazy small. The only 15-inch Chromebook in the universe, ladies and gentlemen, the Acer Chromebook 15, $250. About the size, I have heard about the size and feel of one of the black MacBooks that were all the rage just a few years ago. 15.6-inch screen, Chrome OS, obviously. 4.85 pounds, so not the lightest laptop out there. Quote, I like this from Engadget. Devendra Hardawar wrote this up. I love this line. Quote, isn't meant for people who've grown used to svelte ultra portables. Instead, it seems ideal for schools, and older users might appreciate a larger display. So it's, basically it's a big Chromebook 13. Got a Core i3 or a Celeron processor, which is, I think, a good idea. No touchscreen, which I think is a great idea. There's a 1080p or a 1366 by 760, 1366 by 768 display. I want to say HDMI out, USB 3.0, USB 2.0, SD card reader. But we're looking at, I think, $250 with a 16 or 32 gigabyte solid state drive, and hopefully that's with 4 gigabytes of RAM. Because I've decided at this stage of my life, all laptops and all computers should have more RAM than you think they should.
More than you think they should. I like that. It's interesting. It doesn't have much storage, but for $250, a 15-inch thing. I freely admit I don't have the experience I should have with Chromebooks, especially if you look at kind of what the sales ratings are at Amazon, right? Like frequently the number one selling laptops are Chromebooks. Yeah.
Well, maybe, I don't know if people love them or not, but people buy a lot of them and they give them decent ratings, especially on Amazon.
Yeah.
And they're available everywhere. They're available in Target. They're available in Walmart. And they're super affordable, but also they're also a target for a lot of Windows PC manufacturers that are trying to push traditional Windows laptops down to that price. And of course, there are people who are dropping Linux or in some cases Windows onto the Chromebooks because they get super cheap hardware and then they put an operating system on it that they prefer. You wrote up the Cool Chip Technologies and Cooler Master show Kinetic cooling article.
Yeah.
Kinetic cooling.
So
I'm envisioning chips hitting a wall of ice, and I'm pretty sure it's not that simple or that amusing.
it's close. It's close. It's not actually that.
Damn.
It is cooling where processor cooling, like something that you would mount to a motherboard, where instead of having a fan sitting over a heatsink blowing air onto and through fins of a heatsink, what if you took the fan away and you made the top of the heatsink itself spin instead? That's essentially what you're
Really?
looking at right here. Is that you're looking at two pieces of metal. There's a plate that sits on the processor. It actually mounts down to the processor, and then it has a small post that goes up through the rest of the heatsink that has a little motor and ball bearings in it that spins the top uh, over it, right? And so the top metal kind of, you'll see it has curves in it that make it look like fan blades to some degree. That is to create motion in the air and thus to wick it, you're moving air away from the heatsink as opposed to moving air onto the heatsink, which helps
Mhm.
lower noise first. And then the secret is if you open up the two pieces, this is kind of
Right.
based on a couple of years ago, Sandia Labs was working on kind of metal only cooling, and this is kind of a result of that. If you open up the bottom, if you open up the two halves, you'll see like these little grooves in the top of the plate and then at the bottom of the
Mhm.
part that spins, and you push those together, and what you get is they kind of go in together like alligator teeth or whatever. They're very very close, but they're not touching, right? So there's a very very thin layer of air between this,
Oh.
and as it spins, there's no contact with anything. Um, but that's actually, I think there's a different picture there for you to use, Burke, that actually shows the kind of the inside with these two like with a lot of concentric circles inside of it. Um, and actually, no, I guess that's in the video, not in the thing there. Sorry, but what happens is when they spin, the air between them brings the heat from the bottom plate to the top
Right.
plate, thus to the rest of the heatsink fins, and then it spins. The advantages are lower noise,
Right.
lower profile, and better efficiency, right? So the example, if you watch the video, they have like a 60 or 100 watt um, cooler that would work in like a rack mount server versus a 100 watt cooler that exists today with one of those loud vacuum sound like heat
Mhm.
sinks, for example. And they're telling you like
Well,
we can cool 100 watts here significantly quieter and in the same or smaller profile than what you have here. And then for desktop users, like you're building a home theater PC, that one picture, the one I'm holding in my hand, that's a 60 watt part
okay.
and it's incredibly short, right? So you'd be able to cool any home theater PC processor with it,
Right.
and in thin mini ITX cases and all, anything like that would be possible.
And there is a motor inside of that sort of top hat of metal on there.
Yes, if you look in the
Okay.
very middle of it, where there's like a metal post comes up that would have a nut on the end of it, that's where the
Got it.
motor and bearings are. Is right there. Um,
It's
Cooler
crazy.
Master has partnered with these guys, so they're actually going to be bringing them to market this year, hopefully
Really?
before the first half of the year. Yeah, we'll see the first part. And I think that bottom picture that you were looking at before, Burke, is the prototype of the first one that they will be selling, right? So in that,
Awesome.
what you'll see is a combination of the kinetic cooling, right? And then what surrounds the part that spins is just kind of like traditional heatsink fins, right? That are stationary. With you can see the copper heat pipes kind of going between them, right? So this is kind of a hybrid solution that maybe
Mhm.
will be rated at 150 watts or something like that. So it's actually using the metal that's part of the heatsink to move the air across the fins to the outside, as opposed to needing a fan. So you're lowering the amount of surfaces that come in contact with the moving air, and
Mhm.
that's kind of how you get the lowered noise profile.
Cool.
Yeah.
Intel is apparently ticked off at the whole Raspberry Pi, Chromecast, Roku stick, Arduino kind of universe. Maybe not Arduino, but they have other things competing with Arduino. But they came out with the Compute Stick. Windows. Well, it's a $150 HDMI stick that's capable of running Windows. Scott Michaud wrote this up for PC Per. It's pretty simple. It's an x86 quad core, computer processor, 2 gigabytes of RAM, 32 gigabytes of internal storage, a micro SD, HDMI port. It's going to require a micro USB power cable. It's not doing power over HDMI at this point. USB port. 802.11n wireless networking built in, and it's a computer on a stick that runs Windows. I don't know how else to say that. The Linux version, ironically, which only comes with 1 gigabyte of RAM and 8 gigabytes of storage, is going to be $89. So I'd like to see the Linux version with the full 2 gigabytes of RAM and 32 gigabytes of storage, but I would also like a unicorn and a pony, and I don't think I'm going to get either one of those. I'm kind of curious. It'd be funny if it was $150 and the Windows license was $100, but I'm pretty sure Intel gets a discount on that.
It's Windows 8.1 with Bing, so that's where the lower price on the operating system comes from. I found this to be incredibly impressive, right?
Yeah.
To be able to get this a Bay Trail powered Windows PC plugged into an HDMI port. It could technically be powered by I guess is it MHL that provides power over HDMI, but not a whole lot of TVs really support that, so it does have to have external power from it. But $150 is pretty impressive. Probably, the issue you'll still have when comparing it against like the Fire Stick or the Chromecast or whatever is that those are kind of like appliances. You plug it in, it's got a menu system that comes up, and it's easy to use. When you turn this on, you're going to be, hey, look, you're in Windows. Now what? Right? So the control.
Maybe they'll bring Windows Media Center back. Oh, Microsoft, bring it back.
If they did, I can't imagine that they would want to sell it on the $150 device up front. I think they'd try to find a higher markup option, but I think it'll be very interesting to see how that kind of comes into play. It's like, okay, well, now you have access to Netflix and HBO Go and all that because it's a Windows machine. How do you do that from your couch? How do you do that in an easy fashion? Is the same problems we have with any other home theater PC at that point. So
my favorite thing in the show notes today, that MSI GT80 Titan notebook is immense. This is we were talking about this a few weeks ago. Actually probably a few months ago at this point. The GT80 Titan gaming laptop that has the full-size Cherry MX brown keyboard embedded in the chassis. You got hands-on with it. And I understand that the keyboard feels good, and this actually makes the 17-inch lunch tray style of laptop seem. Is this like carrying a sheet of plywood around? I mean, it looks huge.
It's interestingly, it's not that much bigger than the 17 and 18-inch gaming laptops that are already out there, right? So this is an 18-inch screen. And it's a little bit wider because of using the full-size keyboard. Plus, now the touchpad is moved to the right-hand side there next to the keyboard instead of underneath the keyboard. So it is a little bit wider. It's definitely bigger than other laptops, but it's not so much bigger than those other very large gaming machines. It does come with its own backpack, right? Like it comes in the box with a backpack because it's like you're probably not going to have one that's going to fit this, so we're going to send that along with it. But in person, it was impressive. The keyboard works really well. It will ship with a kind of an angled wrist mat, to kind of ease the ergonomics of of typing on it, because it is the thickness of that part is the entirety of the throw of a single Cherry MX key. The touchpad on the right hand side works well. It's got a button. You can switch it into a virtual number pad, right? You hit the numlock button essentially, and it turns from a touchpad to a number pad, which is kind of neat. And then we got to see, if you watch the video, you'll see some B-roll of the where all the components are, right? If you look above the keyboard but below the monitor, we got to take that plate off and look at the memory and the SSDs. Of course, 4 M.2 PCI Express SSDs, DIMM slots, typical hard drives, 2.5-inch hard drive slot, optical drive slot. It's all in there. And they say you can easily access the MXM ports for the dual GTX 980 mobility GPUs underneath, kind of hinting that it would be a nice upgradable thing. But GPU upgrades on mobile devices have always kind of been a no-show, and unless something dramatic changes in the market, I don't really consider that a big feature, but it's nice to be able to get access to them, I guess. $32.99 is the starting price, by the way.
Ouch.
Yeah. Yeah. Ugh.
I was about to say how much I really like the way all of the upgradable components like lift up the panel and I'm looking at the DIMMs, I'm looking at the drive there, and what are the three things on the left when you're looking at that picture? I can see in between the optical drive and what looks like
those are M.2 PCIe
Okay.
SSDs. So there's 3 there, and then you see the DIMM slots, and then you
Yeah.
see one more PCIe SSD before you get to the
Cool.
hard drive. So that's the four drives running in RAID 0 for incredibly fast storage, and then you still get kind of the mass storage of 7,200 RPM drives. So no shortage of capacity in this case.
And I'm feeling better about that $3,300 price tag after I see all that.
It's still tough. It's still tough. Oop.
Lenovo had a bunch of really interesting products there, and we'll probably talk about those a little bit more over the next couple weeks. But you were particularly, Tim Very wrote this up, but you guys were particularly impressed by the Levy Z notebook and convertible. And this is not the one I thought it would be. Now that you get the Yoga 3, actually, I found particularly impressive, especially the hinge design on that looks fantastic. But this is a 13.3-inch WQHD display, Yamaha audio 720p webcam, 2 USB 3.0 ports, HDMI video output, an SD card reader, headphone jack. Super, super thin. What was it that really kind of blew you guys away about this one?
So yeah, I mean the specifications are kind of like your normal Ultrabook. It is based on Broadwell. It's the weight. It's the build of it, right? So the non-touchscreen version weighs 1.72 pounds. Which
say that one more time. This is a 13.3-inch screen.
Yeah.
What kind of processor is inside of this?
It's a Broadwell-U processor, right? It's one of the latest processors, and it weighs 1.72 pounds.
That's impressive.
And it's made possible. So they have a partnership with NEC, and they developed a material called lithium magnesium, a polymer based on those two things that is incredibly strong and light. And literally, like they took us to the suite and we did the whole walkthrough, and then they said, okay, we want to show you something really cool, and they took the laptop out of a bag and they handed it to us. And when they handed it to me, I said, okay, well this is fake, right? Like this is an empty shell. That's pretty cool, right? Like, okay, this is what the body of this will be made of. Yeah.
Wait, what's it going to be like when it's done?
Yeah, and he opened it and turned it on, and we were like, holy crap. Now, 1.72 pounds, you can get laptops. There are laptops that exist that are 2.5 or 2.7 pounds right now. And so you would think, well, what's one more pound? And it's something about the fact that it's in a 13-inch, this isn't it, but it's in this form factor, right? It's a 13-inch form factor. The distribution of the weight was so even and so like it. When you go to a furniture store and you pick up, like they have the cardboard TVs to kind of demonstrate how it would look in your room, in your house with a TV, right? Like, and you could just, it felt like that. It felt fake. It felt like it wasn't a real thing. And it was incredibly impressive. And they say, it felt the only kind of downside to it is that it doesn't have a what you would call a quote premium feel. It feels like plastic. And it doesn't, like this Yoga 3 Pro has this nice kind of brushed aluminum metal finish, and it feels like a premium product. Levizi doesn't have that, but what you get instead is something that feels like it could get lost in your backpack or purse, right? Like it's really cool. It's really cool, and it's not. They say it's not going to be exceptionally expensive, right? It's going to be around the same price of some of their other machines, and so I'm curious, like, will this start to, if they can make it in the quantities that maybe they want to, start to eat into things like the ThinkPad X1 Carbon or the Yoga 3 Pro, right? Because it's a powerful machine. Maybe it'll be $1,500, a couple $100 more than other Ultrabooks of its capacity or something like that, or of its performance and components. But I mean, it was a really cool device. I would highly recommend everybody check it out, because it's one of those things that it's not going to show in pictures or even in video, and even really saying 1.72 pounds doesn't mean that much until you actually hold it and see. So it's cool. Like we actually
Yeah.
we stacked both it and the touchscreen variant, which is like 2.02 pounds on a scale, and it weighed less than the one Ultrabook we had with us already. So 2 laptops inside the weight profile of one. But I think they said that will be available this quarter, I think. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we'll get one of those in very soon, if possible.
Since you have waxed enthusiastic, I'm going to point out probably the thing that most impressed me in terms of sort of gee whiz factor. And it's going to be odd for people who are regular listeners to the podcast to hear me say this, but the Oculus Rift Crescent Bay demo. Did you get a chance to see that?
I did not do it. No.
You know, I got a chance early to sign up. You had to it was funny to sort of to get into the short line to see it. You had to download an application, create an account, and then log in to schedule your appointment to get. And that was just for normal people. That wasn't for reporters. So it's essentially less latency, the higher resolution, you know, the dots on the side, and it was fantastic. I don't know if it's even remotely done. You know what I mean? It's still, I think, a ways to go before it's a final product. Like, you know, what are we going to do in terms of how to control or interface with things? Is it just going to be like virtual necking with teenagers on Facebook? You know, it was a big booth, like a 2-story booth to do the Crescent Bay stuff. The Gear VR stuff was over there, the Samsung product. You know, and there was a lot of other stuff there. You know, Razer had their open source virtual reality, which is again you know, more of an SDK with hardware than it is a final product. You know, but I got to say, compared to the last developer kit I saw from Oculus Rift, this was really looked good. The latency, you know, I couldn't detail it. The colors looked fabulous. The resolutions looked fabulous, and they were starting to get really, really creative with the demos in terms of, you know, you know, I remember the first one. It's like, oh, it's like Pong. It wasn't quite that bad, but you know, these are much more polished and some interesting kind of, you know, some sort of indie games feel on some of them. Some, you know, there was one that was just like a virtual sort of train set, except it was a little small community city type thing with trains and planes and automobiles and a fire in one of the skyscrapers and an alien comes out of nowhere, and the graphics were absolutely fantastic. And I know I sound ridiculous, but I don't really sit there going, this is so neat very often. But it was one of those experiences where I was like, this is so neat, you know. And I was looking at this one, you know, environment we were in, and I was like, my kids would get lost in this. Assuming they didn't break the headset and run away screaming. But it was a really impressive demo, and the first time I've ever felt like, oh, wow, Oculus Rift really has a chance. I don't know how they're going to control it. I don't know how they're going to sort of deal with the third wall or the fourth wall or the fifth wall, whatever wall we're up to right now. That is, you know, the fact that you can't really walk around with it. There was a booth right behind them that had one of those sort of stand-on-it walking platform, sort of treadmill thing. But I got to say, it was really neat to see it. I suspect that, you know, VR is going to be more about talking with your friends on Facebook or hanging out with people remotely. But it was an interesting experience. I really hadn't expected to ever be impressed by Oculus Rift, but this was my chance to be impressed, and they impressed the snot out of me. And I just want to get that out there.
Well, I guess I need to try that new version as soon as I can. Damn.
Yes.
All right.
Well, just keep your bucket nearby just in case things go wrong.
Well.
What's the story with... Sorry. What's the story with... I did ask them, because they had several people that were running the demos, and I was like, anybody vomit yet today? And she's like, no, happily. So I had to ask.
That's good. That's a plus.
USB 3.1 and USB Type-C connector. USB continues to change, says Mr. Ryan Shrout.
Yeah, it does. It's so MSI actually had a couple of products implementing USB 3.1, and they had a couple of demos running it. So they had a motherboard with 2 USB 3.1 ports and a laptop with 2 USB 3.1 ports. And the benefit of USB 3.1, one of the benefits is improved performance, right? It actually has up to 10 gigabit per second bandwidth capability, which is double what USB 3.0 has. So MSI had a pair of SSD 730 Intel drives running in a RAID 0. We saw performance of almost 700 megabytes per second through that. And considering we're talking about very early firmware on the USB 3.1 chipset, as well as very early implementation of the external kind of drive configuration, that's actually really, really impressive. USB 3.1 will also add additional power capability. I don't know if you knew this, but like you can get up to 100 watts out of a USB 3.1 port, 20 volts times 5 amps out of it, which will lead the way to like charging your whole laptop via USB 3.1. So that's pretty neat. And then the cable, of course, the new Type-C cable connector that is reversible. You can plug it in upside down. It doesn't matter. You don't have to get it wrong 3 times before you plug it in correctly. And it's the same connector on both ends, so you don't have to worry about if you have the right point-to-point cable for that, right? So the part coming out the back of the motherboard will be the same as the one going into the SSD or the drive or the networking device or whatever it happens to be. And so this kind of standardization is pretty good. Now, it's going to be available in the middle of Q1, right? So you'll start to see, I think it was the MSI, what was the board? Z97A Gaming 6 motherboard had USB 3.1 with the new Type-C connector. Meanwhile, their new high-end X99 board that's coming out, the Gaming 9 ACK, will have USB 3.1, but full-size connectors on that. So interesting to see, but there's going to be obviously a lag between seeing the results of 3.1 there and actually getting devices that use 3.1, right? So being able to have external drive docks right now we'll start to see, hey, can you, we were already limiting SATA performance through, or SSD performance rather through SATA, and we were able to saturate USB 3.0 with SSDs. So now we're going to have more headroom to go with SSDs and USB 3.1, PCI Express SSDs instead of SATA SSDs, right? That will be able to take advantage of in USB 3.1. So improvements there in performance all the way around. So that should be good. So usability and performance improvements. It's hard to complain about that.
It is hard to complain about that. I don't know if we're going to do any questions tonight because it's an immensely long show as it is. But if you want to send us an email for a question, twitch@twit.tv is the email address, or you can tweet at Ryan Shrout or at Patrick Norton. As we've mentioned in the past, if you want to find more Ryan Shrout, you should definitely go to pcper.com. I can now be found at a new show that we're launching this week called Tech Thing, TEKTHING.com.
Very cool.
I'm excited. Shannon, a.k.a. Snubs, and I are back at it again starting. Well, actually, we shot our first episode today, which was really, really fun. So
nice.
Hopefully that
I see all the things hanging around behind you. I'm excited to see it. Yeah.
I learned that from you, sir. I learned that from you. Stand in front of a monitor and put your brand on it. It's really simple, Patrick.
Yep.
Thank you, Burke. Burke's a kind man. So please, yeah, it's exciting stuff, or terrifying. I can't remember which. But we will get more into viewer questions our next episode. I'm suspecting, I could be horrendously wrong, there's going to be a bit of a dearth of news. But if there's something about CES or some product coverage you didn't hear us talk about today, feel free to email twitch@twit.tv or tweet at us, and we will see where it ends up in the future. I'm going to, normally at this point I ask you what you're going to do next, but I'm going to think you're going to go to sleep and wake up tomorrow.
I am. I came back in the office this evening for the show, and I started looking around. I was like, oh yeah, since I was gone for a week, all of the work didn't get done. So now it's like, oh yeah, back to the review cycle, and there's some new stuff coming out this month. We're gonna have all these new monitors coming out, both the G-Sync monitors and the FreeSync monitors, trying to get all the Broadwell-U machines lined up. It's going to be a very busy quarter for us here too. So lots to look forward to. Nothing specific, but lots to look forward to.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for enjoying this episode of Twitch This Week in Computer Hardware. It can be found at twit.tv/twitch. You can subscribe there. You can watch the episodes there. You can listen if you want to, if you don't want to see our ugly mugs. But we hope you come back. We hope you enjoy the show.
Indeed.
I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.